Hi, today I really wanted to start talking with you about this idea of challenging your internal negative narrative. We all have an internal negative narrative. Wow, say that 3 times fast. And we call it a myriad of different things. One of the things we often call this narrative is our inner critic. And I think what we need to do is notice that we all have an inner critic. When you're a little kid growing up in the family that you grew up with, in the situation that you found yourself with the caregivers that you had to find a way to survive. And often one of the ways that we learn how to survive is we internalize the voices of those around us. And often those voices can be judgmental, demanding, telling us no, telling us we're not doing it right, that we need to try harder. These voices probably come from a really good place from our caregivers, like they love us, and so they're trying to make us into better people. And yet what ends up happening is we internalize these voices, and then we grow up, and as soon as some situation comes up, our perfectionist voice might kick in, and along with it, the internal critic going, yeah, you're not doing it good enough. You're not doing it good enough. You need to do it better. I don't really think you should do this. In fact, I don't think that you can do this. And this voice can absolutely crush our ability to be not only functional at times, but really stretch ourselves outside of our preconceived limits. And so part of the work of questioning your internal narrative is to start to notice that you even have an internal narrative, that there may be even more than one voice going on inside your head. You may have your internal critic, but you also may have your internal wise person. You may have your rebellious teenager. You may have your, little 6-year-old kid going, somebody take care of me. And all of these voices exist inside of normal, healthy minds. And part of recognizing them is that it gives you a sense of power to know that A, you're not crazy, and B, awareness is key to being able to change what it is that you're hearing. And the work that I've done with people through the years, I have really worked hard around this idea of creating maybe a conference room where we can turn up the volume on some voices while maybe turning down the volume on others. I call it, if your negative narrative is running the bus, then maybe they shouldn't be driving if you're going into something new. On the other hand, your inner critic in that negative narrative can often be an ally. We created that voice for a reason. And often it is something that slows us down when we may be running too far ahead of ourselves. It also can be very beneficial in getting us to question a little more deeply the choices we're about to make. That doesn't mean that it should be the only voice you're listening to. It just means that it is one of a peanut gallery of voices that we need to find a way to have access to so that we're able to make really good, healthy choices for ourselves. I really like to look at sort of what is the counter voice to this negative narrative and this inner critic voice. And so when you think of your own inner critic, and then you think of what voice shows up that is not in opposition to it, but is in balance to it, what voice shows up for you? For me, it's my inner wise person. And that's usually a part of myself that is much calmer, is not running around in a state of anxiety, is probably akin to one of my grandparents' voices, where they would help me think through, like, here are the different consequences of each of these different choices. Let's kind of rack and stack them in order to be able to figure out what your best option is in this given moment. And So in that regard, we're not only making an ally of our inner critic, we're also making an ally of these other voices. And here's the deal. I often work with people and they're like, I just want the inner critic to go away. And the reality is your inner critic is never going to go away. It serves a purpose, but you can become friends with it. You can learn to ask it to please sit in the back of the car or the back of the bus, because I do not need you sitting shotgun with me as I go into this new experience, as I go into this job interview, as I go on this first date, as I take this big leap into a new unknown territory. What I need you to do is be with me, but I need you to turn down the volume so that some of the other voices, like my adventurous voice and my brave voice and my transparency voice and my honesty and integrity voices, can all shine up and show through also. So again, recognizing that you have an inner critic means that you're also recognizing that it's probably not the only voice in your peanut gallery. And it's an opportunity to just get curious about what are these different voices that I have inside of me, and how might changing my relationship, not only to my inner critic, but also to these other voices, change the way I am in relationship to the different situations that show up in my life. So if I can draw up my inner wise person or my very calm, loving, empathetic self, if I'm going into a disagreement with my spouse, I'm much more likely to show up in a way that I want to show up, and ultimately have a much better conversation than if I show up with my inner critic, who then gets defensive and starts blaming. So what would you want to change in your story, and how would you like these voices in your head to work with you? Something to think about. Cheers.